Śrīmad the Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Morning ki jai. Gaur Pramanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 31, The Movements of the Living Entities, text number 36. Prajapati Swam Duhitaram Drishvatad Rupadharshita Rohid Bhutam So Yavadhavad Riksharupi Hatatrapa Prajapati Swam Duhitaram Drishvatad Rupadarshita Rohid Bhutam Son Yavad Rohid Bhutam Sanvadhavad Riksharupi Hatatrapa Prajapati Swam Duhitaram Drishvatad Rupadarshita Rohid Bhutam Sanvadhavad Riksharupi Hatatrapa Prajapati, Lord Brahma, Swam, his own, Duhitaram, daughter, Drištva, having seen, Tatrupa, by her charms, Darshita, bewildered, Rahitputam, to her in the form of a deer, Sa, he, Anvadavat, ran, Riksharupi, in the form of a stag, Hata, bereft of, Japa, shame. Translation. At the sight of his own daughter, Brahma was bewildered by her charms and shamelessly ran up to her in the form of a stag when she took the form of a hind. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Brahma's being captivated by the charms of his daughter and Lord Shiva's being captivated by the Mohini form of the Lord are specific instances which instruct us that even great demigods like Brahma and Lord Shiva, what to speak of the ordinary conditioned soul, are captivated by the beauty of women. Therefore, everyone is advised that one should not freely mix even with one's daughter or with one's mother or with one's sister, because the senses are so strong that when one becomes infatuated, the senses do not consider the relationship of daughter, mother or sister. It is best, therefore, to practice controlling the senses by performing bhakti yoga, engaging in the service of Madana Mohan. Lord Krishna's name is Madana Mohan, for he can subdue the god Cupid or lust. Only by engaging in the service of Madana Mohan can one curb the dictates of Madana Cupid. Otherwise, attempts to control the senses will fail. So, this section of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, after hearing how the living entity takes birth, and we've been hearing about the human form of life, especially that the living entity, including the human being, we begin to act for the happiness of the body, even though by doing so we entangle ourselves in the cycle of birth and death. So, so we're attached to the happiness of the body, and that happiness of the body causes us to take repeated birth and death. Listening to one lecture by Indra Swami, His Holiness Indra Swami, he was explaining that, just like when you go shopping, you may be walking down one of the main streets and you see different things in the window. So, it's big, sort of glamorous, presentation to try and get you to look at something. Now, if you look very close, you really have to stop and you sort of have to search somewhere. You may see a little price tag somewhere. On that little price tag in tiny little writing, it tells you the big price that you'll have to pay and how many months and years you'll have to work for that thing. So the material energy works in the same way. And a devotee, we try and train ourselves to think in those terms. So when we think, yes, material energy is offering some enjoyment in this particular way, and then we think, so how many births, what will that cost me? How many hundreds of births will I take for that little bit of enjoyment like that? So that is the price tag. So still, there's a great warning here that even someone with that level of discernment, they understand the mechanisms of the universe, how it entraps one in the cycle of birth and death. Even with good intelligence and good instruction, knowing, the consequences that our happiness, in the material world will cause in so many different lifetimes of births and deaths. Here, specifically, the warning about sex attraction, which is the main overpowering happiness in the material world, that it has the ability to just, cover over one's intelligence and one's the good instructions that one has had, even of the greatest personalities. And here, we're given the example of Lord Brahma to show how powerful that even in a personality such as Lord Brahma, here is a specific instance, as Prabhupada says, to show that what to speak of anyone else, this can happen, this happened once to Lord Brahma. And so, Srila Prabhupada, in one lecture, talking about this, he explains that don't take that in the wrong way. There's many wrong ways you can take this. But, one wrong way is to think, well, if it happens to Lord Brahma, then, it's not a problem for me. In other words, I shouldn't be too hard on myself, I should just, go with the flow and just be attracted by, the desires in the heart for, the opposite sex and so many things. Brahma can't, overcome that, then how am I? So why, it's not such a problem. So don't think like that. Don't take it like that. But take it that so how careful we have to be. Now, and also that, therefore, then what is the remedy? And, there's no material remedy even for the most elevated material person, most pious person with control of the mind and senses and great knowledge, even such as Brahma. Prabhupada gives the remedy in the purport. So there is a remedy. So the warning is, don't think like that even this may happen to Lord Brahma, so, I'm not going to beat myself up about it, just let the mind and senses go that way. No, but Prabhupada says there is a way, and that way is, it is best, therefore, to practice controlling the senses by performing bhakti yoga. So that is the way. Engaging in the service of Madana Mohan. So, now this is borne out in the story of Lord Brahma, because, in another instance, he chased his daughter Vak, for being bewildered by her charms, and again, the sexual desires were there. But in that particular case, she was not reciprocal. Here, this is a different situation. But anyway, I'll get back to the two different situations. But the point was that in that particular case, the sons of Brahma, headed by Marichi at that time, keeping all due respect for Lord Brahma, they explained to him that, his actions, although he's a great personality and one shouldn't fault a great personality, still his actions would be disruptive to the living entities within the universe. And he should not, he should curtail that behaviour. But then what they did was they prayed to the Lord to protect Brahma. So in that instance, it was understood that even by their good instruction, only by the mercy of the Lord would actually he be, he would be able to rise above that state of heart. See? So even these very elevated personalities were giving very good instruction, which Brahma accepted, but still the whole process depended upon him taking shelter of the mercy of the Lord in that case. So there are now if we look at there's two circumstances where this appears to have happened, and just to summarise it, so this is an instance here we're hearing Śrīmad Bhāgavatam 3rd Canto, chapter 31, text 36. But in the 3rd Canto, chapter 12, text 30, there's another instance where Brahma and chased his daughter Vak. Now, the Acharyas mention that because Brahma had heard the 4 seed slokas of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, and by hearing that from Krishna, Krishna assured him he would not fall into illusion. And it is described that event took place in the first kalpa of the first Manu, so literally the first day of Brahma's life. Therefore, the Acharyas, citing various scriptures, say that this event previously mentioned in the 12th chapter of the third canto was an event that would have happened by the same Brahma, because it's mentioned that no other Brahma has ever done, this, what Brahma has done, nor has this Brahma done that in previous kalpas. So therefore it leaves that this Brahma, in a previous universal creation, this incident with Vak, took place. And in this case, of course, this appears to be a situation with Brahma's daughter, Sarasvati, who appears to have become his wife. So it's explained there that, in the 10th canto, chapter 85, verse 47, it says, "The Supreme Lord said, during the age of the first Manu, the sage Marichi had 6 sons by his wife Una. They were all exalted demigods, but once they laughed at Lord Brahma when they saw him preparing to have sex with his own daughter Sarasvati." And as far as we understand, Sarasvati, because, since Brahma is the only person in the universe and all living entities come from him, it appears that Sarasvati was his daughter and she became his wife. So it's a different instance. So this, this particular incident draws out another very important issue, is that how we should very carefully deal with the wrong behaviour of a very powerful personality. In this case, the head of our Sampradaya, Lord Brahma. So there's some very nice instruction and very nice warnings here. That so it describes there that in the Krishna book, Prabhupada summarises it again, chapter 85. After Lord Krishna heard the prayers of Bali Maharaj, he spoke as follows: "My dear king of the demons, in the millennium of Swayambhuva Manu, the Prajapati known as Marichi begot 6 sons, all demigods, in the womb of his wife Una. Once upon a time, Lord Brahma became captivated by the beauty of his daughter and was following her, impelled by sex desire. At that time, these 6 demigods looked at the action of Lord Brahma with abhorrence." So they had a very, critical, chastising type of mentality towards Brahma, their grandfather. So this is happening in the Swayambhuva Manu first. So then it describes in the next verses of chapter 85 of the 10th canto, because of that improper act they immediately entered a demoniac form of life, and thus they took their birth as sons of Hiranyakashipu. The goddess Yogamaya then took them away from Hiranyakashipu, and they were born again from Devaki's womb. After this, O king, Kamsa murdered them. Devaki still laments for them, thinking of them as her sons. These same sons of Marichi are now living here with you. So, Prabhupada mentions, he summarises that in the Krishna book, that this criticism of Brahma's action by the demigods constituted a great offence on their part. And for this reason they were condemned to take birth as the sons of the demon Hiranyakashipu. So it's a very interesting point. So here, Brahma's actually done something wrong. That does not give leeway for those who are subordinate to Lord Brahma to create an offence in how they treat him, even though he's done something wrong. And for this, they were condemned. Now, it describes here, again, this is a very, quite a summary of a lot of events, but they were not exactly, the Acharyas described them, they didn't take birth exactly as the sons of Brahma, more like the grandsons. They were accepted like sons of Hiranyakasipu. They were accepted like sons of Hiranyakasipu. They took birth as sons of Kalanemi, who was related to Hiranyakasipu, also something like a son. So in effect, these 6 demigods took birth as the sons of Kalanemi, who was killed by Vishnu. So they took birth. So they were, in that birth, they were also cursed by Hiranyakasipu. They were further cursed by him because in that birth they went to Lord Brahma to pray for some benedictions that the demigods and etc. couldn't kill him. And he was angry because they were like sons that they'd taken benedictions from a demigod rather than him. And so he cursed them also, and then they took birth in the curse that they would be killed by their own father. You've offended your father, you'll be killed by your father. So he's thinking, your actions are like killing me, so you'll be killed by your father. And so they took birth as the sons of Kamsa and as the sons of Devaki, and were killed by Kamsa. And so in the, I think it's the 11th canto, there's a verse there that describes that when one acts in an envious way towards any living entity, what to speak of towards superiors, that in effect, through their own mind, they're attacking themselves. So, and I was speaking about this in Bhaktivedanta, that you see an example of this where you get a small bird sometimes attacks the mirror of a car. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And sometimes you stop at the traffic lights and the sparrows think, this is my zone. And they see the bird in the mirror is what really gets them, and they think, oh... So they come and they attack the mirror. So they're actually attacking themselves like that. So envy is like that. Whoever you're directed to, you get the same result. So that was the result that they got. So so through that, we see such a reaction. Taking birth in the family of demons twice and then being killed by Kamsa, murdered. For that reaction, very strong reaction of being critical, condescending of a superior person, even though that superior person had done something which was wrong. So certainly, that's not to say that, if a superior person does something wrong, that nothing should happen. So therefore, we see that either Krishna will correct or sages will correct, but they're very, very careful how they do that. And you see in the case of let's see. Marichi. So we see here that, going back to the incident with, in previous incident of Brahma, previous universe, where they were, he was corrected by Marichi and the sons of Brahma. So Canto 3, Chapter 12, text number 29 says, "Thus finding their father so deluded in an act of immorality, the sages headed by Marichi, all sons of Brahma spoke as follows with great respect." So I'll read the commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and the purport by Srila Prabhupada. So first, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says, out of friendship, since they were his offspring, they instructed him not because of anger on seeing sin. All the meaning can be having faith that even the sins of great persons are not sins. They gave instructions only out of fear. So they gave instructions only out of fear of disturbance in the consequent population. This indicates that Marichi and others did not commit offence in speaking. So here, they've spoken to Lord Brahma, keeping a very friendly relationship and keeping very respectful. At the same time, within the universe, his sons are probably the only persons who really have that position where they can, in a very friendly way, but instruct that, we understand that there's, many important issues in the events of the lives of very powerful personalities. But without criticising and without being offensive, can you consider the effect that it may have on others when they see those activities being performed and like that? So very respectful, but still the adjustment being made. Prabhupada's purport to that is that the sages like Marichi were not in the wrong in submitting their protest against the acts of their great father. They knew very well that even though their father committed a mistake, there must have been some great purpose behind the show, otherwise such a great personality could not have committed such a mistake. It might be that Brahma wanted to warn his subordinates about human frailties in the dealings with women. This is always very dangerous for persons who are on the path of self-realisation. Therefore, great personalities like Brahma, even when in the wrong, should not be neglected, nor could the great sages headed by Marichi show any disrespect because of this extraordinary behaviour. So, there's some very, powerful instructions there. Of course, we'll get back to the issue of, the danger of being attracted by sex desire, how, powerful that is, not to be underestimated. But here, just first understanding this, because, even in, some disciples, reading, disciples of Srila Prabhupada reading, Srila Prabhupada's books, wrote letters to him, that's questioning, is Brahma a pure devotee? And Srila Prabhupada, was quick to respond, yes, he's a pure devotee. Which is a very, interesting situation that even within pure devotees, sometimes there are, some, maybe some instances of wrongdoing. Here we see with Brahma, again, it's described here that in a previous universe, only this Brahma, not others. And even in that universe, it wasn't done before. Very rare. Otherwise not done. And here, so you have an instance, a specific instance. Not as if, so we should be very careful not to think that Lord Brahma, he's always, falling down and doing so many things. Pure devotee, there's an instance, It's not, in judging, but because it's such a powerful incident, it tends to make one's consciousness just think of a person in a particular way, in a particular negative way, which is very dangerous and overshadowing. So in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, in the Nectar Devotion, it describes that, warning against criticism. Srila Prabhupada says, when there's a mountain of good, one should not find fault. There may be fault. But what about the mountain of good? Have you seen that? So, and we see also, Srila Prabhupada was always very defensive of criticisms of his followers. He understood that, yes, some things are not proper. Some mistakes are made. Sometimes some wrongdoings are done. Quoting Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada also quoted the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as well, but because their minds are always fixed on Krishna, they're not, running to, different demigods, different materialists. The followers of Prabhupada, they only try to think of Krishna all the time. And because of that exclusive attachment to Krishna, they count as his pure devotees, even in the immature state. And therefore Krishna takes them to be, topmost. And because they're doing the main correct thing that should be done, therefore the other things should be, carefully seen in that context. So amongst billions and billions of living entities, you get a very rare few who, have proper religious tendencies, and amongst them those who are, devoted to Krishna, extremely rare. And for those who, according to their, ability, trying to dedicate themselves and follow that path of devotional service and, to purify themselves of bad habits and bad qualities within the heart, if you take their life, they're doing the best thing as the main thing in their life, which is very rare even amongst demigods who are very, very pure and, perform so many pious activities. Therefore, because they're doing the most wonderful, and they're trying to help others to become Krishna conscious, above and beyond that, which Krishna says that amongst my devotees, those who preach Krishna consciousness, there is no one more dear to me than them. And by preaching Krishna consciousness, they are saving the living entities from the hellish conditions of material existence. So because they're doing the main thing by helping people go back to the spiritual world to get out of, and they're trying to do that themselves, therefore, the other things have to be taken in that context. Okay. So, one certainly shouldn't take advantage of Krishna's leniency or partiality towards his devotees. As we see here, that in the case, when as devotees, everyone who is a devotee of the Lord actually means they're representing Krishna. So if something wrong is being done, it's a reflection on Krishna. As Krishna said to Arjuna, you're not going to fight. That's a reflection on me. That's the inference given in the Bhagavad Gita. How you do that to me? You're my devotee, you're one of my greatest devotees. How does that look for me? That you're going to do the wrong thing against my instruction, against my teaching. So, therefore Krishna will correct, or someone should correct. Things should be corrected, but correction when devotees, perhaps, their behaviour is not fully, online, sometimes even a really big mistake, like Indra, Indra, literally wanted to practically kill the residents of, Vrindavan. But still, things should be done with all due respect and Vaishnava etiquette in respect to devotees, especially senior devotees. So then, keeping that in mind, and then taking this pastime, when you then look at the, this aspect here. So I'll read the purport also to Canto 3, Chapter 12, text number 28. And Srila Prabhupada, quoting from the 9th canto of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, he says, "It is said, the senses are so mad and strong that they can bewilder even the most sensible and learned man. Therefore it is advised that one should not indulge in living alone even with one's mother, sister or daughter. Vidvam Shamapi Kasadi means that even the most learned also become victims of the sensuous urge. Maitreya hesitated to state this anomaly on the part of Brahma, who was sexually inclined to his own daughter, but still he mentioned it because sometimes it so happens, and the living example is Brahma himself, although he is a primeval living being and the most learned within the whole universe. If Brahma could be a victim of the sexual urge, then what of others who are prone to do so many mundane frailties? So here again, apart from Marichi instructing Brahma, even in the Bhagavatam we see Maitreya speaking of this subject, and he's hesitant to even mention it. And we see, I think it's, I'm not sure which Sampradaya one, I think the Madhva Sampradaya, Brahma's bewilderment where he, took all Krishna's calves and cowherd boys. They don't like to comment on that at all, because, see, so it's, just they don't want to commit that, they don't want to even tread in that direction, that there may be some offence. So he says, this extraordinary immortality on the part of Lord Brahma was heard to have occurred in some particular kalpa, but it could not have happened in the kalpa in which Brahma heard directly from the Lord the 4 essential verses of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, because the Lord blessed Brahma after giving his lessons on the Bhagavatam that he would never be bewildered in any kalpa whatsoever. This indicates that before hearing the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, he might have fallen a victim to such sensuality. But after hearing Śrīmad Bhāgavatam directly from the Lord, there was no possibility of such failures. So, because he heard that those verses of the Bhagavatam in the first kalpa, then the previous kalpa to that was in another universe, but it's understood to be this Brahma in a previous universe. So, one should, however, take serious note of this incident. The human being is a social animal, and his unrestricted mixing with the fair sex leads to downfall. Such social freedom of man and woman, especially among the younger section, is certainly a great stumbling block on the path of spiritual progress. Material bondage is due only to sexual bondage, and therefore unrestricted association of man and woman is surely a great impediment. Maitreya cited this example on the part of Brahma just to bring to our notice this great danger. So again, this theme you will find in all religions, that this mixing of men and women freely is taboo. Avoid that. It creates social problems. It leads to irreligious behaviour. It leads to losing one's mind and senses and behaving badly, even for great personalities. So therefore, but what we see is that for instance, in the world now, there are some religious groups who trying to implement this in a very uneducated way. They want to establish these principles by the force of violence. And but they do not understand that really by force, by legislation, you cannot actually implement this in society, because it is such a powerful force, even that Lord Brahma falls victim to that sensuous urge. What to speak of us? What legislation, what sort of force are they going to use to stop living entities when it has that effect even on Brahma? Okay. So there has to be a spiritualization of the consciousness where one experiences a higher transcendental attraction. And because one doesn't understand that, in different religious organisations they don't understand that, although they're very fanatical in trying to stamp out this desire within others, in many cases that violence or frustration that comes out on others is due to not being able to control that sexual urge in their own selves. And it's like an artificial show of superiority. What interests me, that in some religious groups, the goal is that somehow if you fight for these principles, religious principles, your major goal is you can go to heaven and enjoy so many virgins. Well, that's sex desire, isn't it? Isn't it? So, that's the same thing. I'm trying to stamp out sex desire and mixing, and when I go to heaven, my goal is there'll be so many virgins supplied to me, unlimited sex any time of day and night. That's sex desire. So, one cannot stamp that out in oneself or others by force, legislation, violence, so many different things. There must be bhakti. There must be bhakti. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 3rd chapter, it describes that, this lust is the all-devouring sinful enemy of the world. But Prabhupada, very nicely describes in the Bhagavatam that originally that lust is love. That's the happiness that the soul is actually looking for, is pure love. Not a love which is a disguise for sense gratification, not that sort of love, skin love, but love with the definition of pure love, of course, is there is no personal desire for one's own happiness, in one sense. One is acting for the happiness of the beloved. That. So that, and the most attractive, all attractive, lovable object is Krishna. So if one wants to develop that, that natural loving sentiment of the soul, then one should become attracted by Krishna. And because, as I say, God is love, by association with Krishna, that lust becomes transformed into love. So much so, we're reading some verses on a similar vein in Bhaktivedanta, where, in a couple of different letters, Srila Prabhupada wrote that, some of his disciples, they asked, having trouble with sex desire, and he was saying, you should read the pastimes of Krishna and the gopis. And this is going back to, I think it was 1968, 1969 or something, that letter. So imagine how young these devotees are. And he's saying to them, so he's not expecting that they're some, elevated, devotees. These are new devotees in one sense. And Prabhupada's saying, you want to conquer that, sex desire, you read these pastimes of Krishna and the gopis, because means you read them in Prabhupada's books. Because actually when you read these things in Prabhupada's books, like the Krishna book, in the 10th canto, or throughout Prabhupada's books, he brings you back. He always mentions these loving pastimes. When you hear the beautiful loving pastimes, the happiness derived from love, which is unlimited and eternal, you think to yourself, I want that. You begin to compare sex life in this world, within the course of a whole lifetime, there's a few moments of sex life, so much trouble, so much work, so much endeavour, so many problems. And here in the spiritual world, that original form of sex life, that transcendental love between the Lord and the living entity without any tinge of sense gratification, is done without any impediment. There's no, as it describes in the Bhagavatam, that in this world, people work until they're frothing at the mouth. That's our happiness, For a moment's sex pleasure, we spend many, many, many years working till we're frothing at the mouth like an animal. So when you hear the comparison, so for a couple of moments of sex life, so many births, so many deaths, so much trouble even in this one life, what to speak of so many other lifetimes. Spiritual world is eternal, it is loving. I think I'll take that one. Okay. See? So, and this is ultimately, we're hearing this section of the Bhagavatam, and you may think, this section of the Bhagavatam is, coming down hard on sex life like that. It's just preparing you, don't worry, don't freak out, there's something better. It's coming. So we'll get there, we'll get to that. But actually, Srila Prabhupada is very kind. He quite often, knowing that we might read some of these things and get a little worried, he quite often slips the end goal, into the purports earlier on. Anyway, but another point I'd like to mention also, because we were talking about, how sometimes the endeavour to stamp that sensuous nature within oneself or, within others, it can create a very horrible attitude towards women by men. And, even in India, they're having a massive problem, with this. This is the land of Bhagavad Gita. what to speak of other countries. You know, one should be very, very careful. Again, this is also not an excuse to condemn women. Oh, you're the scourge of mankind, the cause of all my problems. It's like one devotee asked, you know, Prabhupada, oh, these women in the kitchen, Prabhupada, how can I do my service? Oh, if you're agitated, then don't go in the kitchen. Not that the women should leave, you leave. You know. So, you know, we have to be very, very careful that, you know, that attitude, again, doesn't make women the enemy. You know, I mean, I have 5 daughters. I certainly wouldn't want them to be the enemy of every man in the world, because they're women. You know, so you know, one has to be very respectful, especially, you know, I mean, all women, especially Vaishnavas, because then they have another qualification as well of, you know, women apart from one's wife, or women are seen as mother, very respectful. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the elders, the parents, they should be respected. That means the mother, the father. We look at all women as mother, apart from our wife. And so, you know, this, what to speak of, you know, the women being Vaishnavis, which means that one should be very, very careful. And as we see here, Vaishnavis are very, very elevated personalities, and you see the result of offending a Vaishnava or a Vaishnavi. The fault of an offence to a Vaishnava or a Vaishnavi is that you'll be implicated in very unsavoury activities. Here, these devotees from the heavenly planets took birth in demoniac families and were murdered. Akrura, he went to Vrindavan to get Krishna and take him back, and he was thinking, well, you know, I'll get to see Krishna, and, you know, so it was wonderful for his own spiritual life. But he became cursed by the gopis. You know, you're taking Krishna from us. So it was his duty, but he may have been better to fall at their feet and beg over and over again for their forgiveness. In the name of duty. Sometimes you see that, you know, even amongst devotees in ISKCON. They get authority from somewhere above, and that authority means I now can commit any offence because I have authority to do this. You know, it doesn't count. The authority will not protect one. Nothing will protect one. Nothing in the universe. We cannot commit, aparad. And therefore, what happened to Akrura, and also, Kritavama. Kritavama was another pure devotee of the Lord. It's said that because of his association with a sinful person, Kamsa, he was also implicated. So both Akrura and Kritavama became implicated in the murder of Satyabhama, Krishna's in the murder of Satyajit, Krishna's father-in-law. And the Acharyas say that it's because of their offences to Vaishnavis, the gopis, and even associating with a sinful person, an offensive person, they became implicated in the murder of Krishna's father-in-law. Okay? So one has to be very, very careful of offences, and in the endeavour to curb our sensuous nature and develop love of God, we should not commit offences to the Vaishnavas within this movement. And also, sometimes, even in senior devotees, there may be some problems. We should be very careful how those situations are handled, leave it to the right people to correct them, done in a very nice way, and avoid offences. Even if someone has done something wrong, there is no excuse for creating Vaishnava Parad. So these are some of the wonderful instructions we can get from this verse. I'll just leave it here if anyone has any questions or comments.
I'm just wondering, should we, from a Guru he got the order to do it, but that was disturbing to other devotees. Should we accept the services? Can we refuse the services which are disturbing for the others?
Well, sometimes we can't. Sometimes we can't avoid, we're in a situation where we have to follow authority, and at the same time, we don't want to become implicated. Sometimes, because sometimes that's what happened with the sons of Hiranyakasipu. They actually usurped his authority, sort of taking authority from someone else. I'll not act according to your authority, I'll act according to Brahma's authority, and therefore, because of that, they were cursed by him as well. So, I'll tell you a funny story, just to help you. Krishna compensates. I'll tell you a story about when I was in Perth. So, what had happened at about that time, or somewhere before that, Korma had actually gone to jail and got a lot of publicity because he fasted in jail. I think he went to jail because they were chanting on the streets. So, he got a lot of recognition, what have you. So when I was in Perth, there was a temple president there, and I think he wanted to get a little publicity, so I think he wanted to do something similar. Anyway, he came up to me in the morning, before we went out on Hare, we were going to go out, and he said, if anyone asks you who's the temple president, you say, you are. So I said, all right. So follow, And of course, this is a very small temple. If you don't follow the temple president, you're not going to get butter on your muffins in the morning. Believe me. Amongst other things. But he will sit down and eat in front of you. That's it. Yes, got the butter. So, for a brahmachari, that's pretty hard, pretty tough stuff. You've got to go out and sankirtan all morning, you've got no butter on your muffins. So anyway, we went out on Harinam, and what happened was he got us specifically to stand in front of the Maya's window and chant. So we're chanting, and then the manager come out, you could predict, and said, we want you to move forward. If you even move one forward, there was an awning there, if you just move a metre forward, you're not on our property, you're not blocking our window. But if you don't, we'll call the police. So he come out and he said, so who's the leader here? And, the temple. So I said, I'm the leader. And he said, all right, if you don't move, we'll throw you in jail. So I turned to him and I said, if you don't move, he's going to throw us in jail. He said, tell him to chant Hare Krishna, we're not moving. Would you like to chant Hare Krishna, sir? Because we're not moving, like that. So anyway, then the police came. So then the police come up again. Who's the leader? Yeah. I'm the leader. They said, all right, if you don't move, we're going to throw you in the paddy wagon. So they got the paddy wagon there. They open up the doors, At this stage, the women, who are more intelligent than the men, just walked off. You can see what's going to happen with these men. They're all going to end up in jail. So they just walked off with the kids. Went back to the temple. So I said to the police, I got the same instruction, look, we're not moving, maybe you'd like to chant Hare Krishna with us. All right, into the paddy wagon. So they threw us all into the paddy wagon, took us down, and they locked us up in jail. Right? So then what happened was, a devotee who's coming through from Hong Kong had some paraphernalia, paintings we used to sell. He didn't know what the leader's name was and what have you, so he comes through and he said, I'm going to bail one person out. So the police come into the lock-up room and said, who's the leader? And the devotee said, the temple president said. So I said, I'm the leader. All right, you're bailed out. And so I got bailed out. You see? So then I went back to the temple where the ladies were, who were quite disgusted with the whole affair. And we said, look, we can gather up the money and bail them out, or we can just leave them there overnight. And it was a unanimous decision, leave them there overnight. But, you know, the point of that is that sometimes you're following authority and it may not necessarily be the best thing, but Krishna will make some adjustments. So, but you can't offend authorities, just willy-nilly, even if they're not behaving properly. You still have to be very careful. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Gangeswar. I know Prabhupada. Gangeswar.
Sorry, I haven't been to Melbourne in a long time.
What was your name?
I'm Anurana.
Anurana.
I used to be Jalala a long time ago, but you don't recognize me anymore.
Well, I do recognise your face, but I'm not sure where I've seen you.
I don't mind. I was just trying to remember if I knew you or
I was in Perth with Purushottam.
That's it.
Yeah,
Well, because when you said TP in Perth, and I'm thinking of it. Oh, okay. They were pretty wild days.
They were.
Wild Western days. I hope we've grown up a bit since then.
I sometimes tell the devotees, most of the stories I can't tell you. There's the odd one I can,
I hear you. Yeah, right. It's kind of like my kids or some of the younger generation. I've had some responses like they just looked at me in complete disbelief, like, you allowed that?
Yeah.
You did that?
Yeah.
So now I don't tell these stories anymore.
I did that
They
sometimes.
were a different time.
Bhakti by Baba, I told a story and they're all like,
Yeah,
I
right.
thought, okay, that's it, no more stories like that, I'll tone them down.
It was a different time.
That's right.
I think you've had to come from that era to appreciate it.
That's right, yeah. And, there wasn't anything you could do. You had to sort of just...
Well, the